Hi everyone, thank you for clicking and welcome to highlights and analysis for the women's Ironman 70.3 Memphis. Two names very much stood out on the start list, Ellie Salthouse and Jackie Herring, both of whom had won their very competitive heats in the Collins Cup back in August and both also raced in the 70.3 Worlds a couple of weeks ago. Salthouse would also be doubling up after a win at 70.3 Augusta last weekend. Ali Brower and Didi Griesbauer, who you may know from commentating on these Ironman events, also towed the start line. Salthouse was very decisive from the start, moving to the front almost immediately. Ali Brower was the only one who was able to go with her, leaving their competitors to fend for themselves, having to swim largely solo. Griesbauer looked to be well in the mix in the early shots, but took a wrong turning in the water and ended up pulling out of the race. Interestingly, there were only 8 pro women in the field and the prize purse paid out 8 deep, so finishing would have actually guaranteed at least $1,000. Salthouse looked to be pushing pretty hard in the swim throughout with a fast arm turnover. It wasn't enough to distance Brower though, who stuck on Salthouse for the entire swim. These two came out of the water together with a 1-minute lead over a lone Jackie Herring in third. Everyone else was similarly isolated, spread over 3 to 4 minutes 30 back. The last two races Salthouse and Herring have both featured in played out very similarly. In both the Collins Cup and 70.3 Worlds, Salthouse swam slightly faster and biked about a minute quicker, but Herring then ran herself ahead, taking 5 minutes out of Salthouse on the Collins Cup run and 8 minutes in St George. It would therefore very much be a case of how much time Salthouse could put into Herring on the bike. And with Salthouse on her third week of consecutive racing, you'd think it'd very much be advantage to Jackie Herring. Onto the bike, Salthouse opened up a gap to Brower in second very early on as the rain continued to come down, and it was a pretty convincing start. Through the first time check, Salthouse had put time into both Brower and Herring, who were 2 minutes 15 and 2 minutes 35 back respectively. The next athlete back was Laura Matthews, who was almost 10 minutes back at this point, so it's very much a 3-horse race. Herring bridges across to Brower over the next 10k, but interestingly she doesn't just breeze past. Herring has made up a minute to Brower over the last 40k, so presumably she does have the strength to distance her if she wants to. However, instead, Herring chooses to work with Brower, whilst this pro man hitches a ride on the Herring-Brower train. It's an interesting choice from Herring. It should allow her to save her legs slightly more than Salthouse, who is riding solo out front, but there is a risk that this benefit will be outweighed by letting Salthouse grow her gap even further. Around the 50k mark, Salthouse's lead looks to have settled around 2:45, which seems to suggest Herring's decision to work with Brower has been a good one so far. The next 20k though is where Salthouse starts to do some damage, opening up another minute on Herring and Brower, who are still riding together, now 3:45 back. With Salthouse likely to suffer from her efforts in Augusta last weekend, this is still looking okay for Herring, who has a track record of running 5 minutes faster than Salthouse over this distance. As they come into T2, Salthouse has closed off the bike very strongly and takes a 4-minute 40 lead onto the run over Herring, who has ridden 2/3 of the bike with Ali Brower. Herring settles into her run rhythm very quickly, pulling away from Brower at a rate of 30 seconds a kilometre. It initially looks good for Salthouse, who only gives 4 seconds to Herring over the first 2k. However, as the run goes on, Herring is clawing back time at a faster rate, and it becomes apparent that the middle kilometres of this run are going to be very important. At 5k, the gap between Salthouse and Herring is 4 minutes. At 7k it's 3 minutes 30, and at 10 it's 2 minutes 50. The gap is closing and Herring is running noticeably faster, but at this rate Herring is going to run out of road before Salthouse runs out of time. With 5k left, it's still looking good for Salthouse, who is definitely slowed but is still looking in control. Despite having a very comfortable buffer to third though, Herring doesn't give up the chase. It's not quite enough from Herring though, as Salthouse clinches her 7th win for the year, a minute ahead of Herring in second. Ali Brower comes home next for a well-earned third. With Herring losing 4 minutes to Salthouse on the bike, a fair bit more than at the Collins Cup in St George, it begs a question of whether it was a wise decision to stay with Brower for quite so long. A very strong race from Salthouse though, who raced the whole thing pretty much solo in less than ideal weather conditions. As always, thank you very much for watching.